Joining me now is Paddy Tyson, the editor of Overland Magazine. Paddy, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Thanks so much for taking the time and reaching out across the pond and joining us here and participating in Bedtime Stories with me. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome.
I was just telling the audience in advance, people who aren't familiar about Overland Magazine and how beautiful it actually is. Um, can you sort of, in your words, let's have it in your words. You created this magazine, and what was the rationale behind it? Why don't you just tell us a little bit more about it?
Oh, in essence, I became a middle-aged man who loved motorbikes, who remained loving motorbikes, and who realized that although I wanted to read about motorbikes, I didn't want to buy any motorbike magazines anymore. In essence, I thought they were too formulaic. I kind of knew what would always be in there. And if I read reviews, there was generally some sort of commercial imperative that, it might be that whoever bought the most ads would get the number one review. And that, for me, it was just, you could often see through that. And I just thought, what a shame. What a real shame. What I want from a magazine is I just want to sit down with a cup of coffee, read an article for 15 or 20 minutes about somewhere wonderful in the world where someone has ridden a bike, a few pictures that will inspire me to do the same thing, and, boom, that's where I want to lose myself. And then I'll put it down, and I'll come back to it some other point, and I'll read another piece. And with any luck, a friend of mine might come in and see it on the coffee table and say, whoa, great pictures, shall we go to that place? And that was sort of my dream. Can I make something like that? And that's what we did.
And you've been doing that for 10 years now, has it?
10 years, yeah. We started in 2010. I started putting the first one together in 2010.
Well,
and although there's now 4 a year, so we're quarterly.
Well, a colleague of mine a friend of mine, when he saw it on my coffee table, picked it up and said, "This is the National Geographic of motorcycle travel magazines," and he was so blown away. So congratulations on that. Now,
Thank you very much.
when did it become available in North America?
That was about 2015 or 16. We first got a trial run in Barnes & Noble in the States, and then it was probably a year after that it went into more stores in Barnes & Noble, and then we got into Canada, got into chapters at the same time. And for us, having plugged away here in the UK, it was amazing to get into North America, because we may be on the edge of Europe, but unless I produce a German version and a Spanish version and a French version, I can't reach the readership. And here we had in North America, boom, massive possible population. So it was great.
Well, when I came across it a few years ago, I found it in a chapters. That's how I first found the magazine, and
Right.
it's actually a beautiful publication. So congratulations on that. I want to shift the focus because, and I'm going to bring it up at the same time so people can see. In 2008, you did a journey and followed it up with a book called Puerto del Faglioli, and
A hunt for.
The hunt. Oh, sorry, the hunt for Puerto del Faglioli. Mea culpa, and 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 it is one of the funnest reads I have ever. I have a picture of the book up here so everybody can see it right now. It is by far one of the funnest reads that I have ever seen or enjoyed. And tell me, what was the inspiration behind this?
The book was a total accident. The trip, the inspiration for the trip is the world. But I mean, there are multiple times I have set off now to try and get to Prudhoe Bay at the top of Alaska. And I've never made it yet. So this time, the time you're talking about, I ended up at the Darien Gap, which is also in the wrong direction. The previous time I set off for Prudhoe Bay, I ended up in the Philippines. So yeah, I've had some difficulty, which is funny because I always wanted to be a cartographer. But no, the way I travel is serendipitous. I love not having rules. I love not having GPS. I love meeting someone who says, "Oh, you're going to XYZ. You got to go see Cousin Bob." And I go, "Well, that's about 500 miles out of my way." They go, "Yeah, but it's nice up there." So you think, "Oh, well, okay." And you never know what's going to happen. So rather, the same serendipity played a part in the book because I had never planned to write a book. I was emailing some friends home. It really was very personal. And when I finished, it turns out so many of those people had started their own email groups, and it had gone a bit viral. And everyone said, "Well, where's the book? There's obviously a book. It's a book." But so I thought, well, I'll just stick all the emails together. It's already written.
Well, forgive me, but and I hope you'll be comfortable with me telling everybody this, but some of the genius in your writing is that you make light of the absurdity, and I thought it's just. How many times have I entered a Canadian border crossing and see the sign at an airport port of entry, and there's a sign there saying, "Please declare all firearms." There is no way you can get a firearm into the country. You just got off an airplane. Why would you be declaring? And yet you point these little idiosyncrasies out that most people, 99.9% of the people, just take for granted as an everyday occurrence. You go on in your book. You talk about Canadians' love of donuts and coffee shops and, and Tim Hortons and and then you carry it on through the travels in every region. I want to point out, and maybe this is just because, and I hadn't read your book beforehand, but we both even have a chapter in our books called "Taking It Easy," which I think is absolutely hilarious. Tell me about your experience down in Winslow, Arizona.
Gosh, and the smell of disinfectant, if I recall. An obvious, staying in a motel. I appreciate it was not one of the motels that made figure for you because it wasn't architecturally very pleasing. But yeah, I could have sworn it was some kind of crime scene they'd been cleaning up. No, my taking it easy and so many other references. I felt really bad about. I didn't pay any royalties. I never asked all of those 70s rock acts every time I wanted to abuse their lyrics throughout the book. So I suppose this should be a public apology for that. Yeah, sorry, all you very wealthy people out there who could sue me.
Yeah, well, in all due respect, I did the same thing on a couple of occasions, but I'm hoping that, just the mere reference and that we're promoting it, that they'll be kind and not take me to court over those things. That's kind of my hope. So to Glenn Fry and Jackson Brown, who wrote "Taking It Easy," mea culpa again. And it's funny because our roots sort of crisscrossed a little bit away too. I mean, you ended up in a place called the Paintbrush Motel, which I absolutely love the name, and I've been Googling it trying to find it to see if I can add it to the Motelorcycle list.
Well, I hope they've knocked it down, frankly.
Well, I point out in my book that most of these motels were actually built to be torn down, so it wasn't designed. They weren't ever designed to be long lasting. So it's quite possible it no longer exists. Hence the Motelorcycle, the raison d'être behind it, to go and find these cool places. But you also you tried to get to Custer. You got pulled over a couple of times. I think in Wyoming as well. I was pulled over in Wyoming. I have a great shot of me with the state trooper. It's just.
I got a very pleasant. I had actually one of the nicest muggings I've ever had. It was terribly polite. I got pulled over in Nicaragua, and really, really pleasing. Policeman stepped out from behind a tree, pulled me over. Buenos dias. And we had this little chat, and he said, "Where are you from?" I said, "Irlanda del Norte." And he was like, "Oh, lovely." And he said, "El pasaporte." So I give me the passport, and he had a little look at it, and he looked at the bike, and then he said, $10. I said, "What for?" He said, "I have the passport, I have the gun, you have neither." And I just thought, how incredibly polite. And he had a point. So, and then off I went. $10 later, it was all fine.
I have the passport. That's
to
hilarious.
be fair, it was more frightening when I got pulled over in Arizona, down on the border. And this is a long time ago now. I'd say it's 12 years ago.
Tell that story because it's a phenomenal story, and I couldn't believe it. I'm like, oh my god! Go ahead, please.
Well, this car pulled me over. This silver patrol car pulled me over, and didn't really give me any opportunity to say anything. Just immediately pulled his weapon and started screaming at me for having a vehicle with a number plate that wasn't an Arizona number plate. And I thought, well, this is a bit odd. I mean, I've been in the States at this point. I've probably been in the States for 8 months or 9 months or something. And he said, nobody can ride in Arizona without an Arizona number. I said, well, of course you can. I mean, I just come from California. Oh, look, there goes a Californian car, it's just gone past. No, you can't. If you're coming into this from, you've got to get an Arizona plate. I said, well, technically I crossed in Montana. Should I have a Montana plate? Because that's when I came into the States. That confused him for a little while. But he was like, no, adamant. No, you must have an Arizona plate. And I said, but you can cross borders with motorcycle. And he said, no, you can't. Nobody has ever crossed an international border with a motorcycle. I said, I think I have. And I wasn't going to start telling him about, Ewan McGregor and Charlie Foreman and goodness knows who else. But he did get really angry, and he spat in my face, and he put the gun to my head, and he pushed me in the chest.
Wow.
And he pointed the gun at my chest, and he got on the radio, and he radioed back, and sure enough, yeah, there's no way, no one can do this. You can't, And luckily I had Matt with me, the Alaskan guy that I met. And he'd been shouted at, and the gun had been pointed at him too, because he was going to dismount and come over, and they were like, no, you're going to stay right where you are. So of course he did do his best to get a camera out, take some pictures of me, and I think he was probably going to try and sell them on YouTube or something, if I did get blown away. But it was bizarre, and so they agreed in the end, because I said to him, sorry, I'm probably talking too long now.
No.
But I said to the guy, I said, if you do take my license plate, if you are going to do this, you're going to trap me. I'll be stuck here. I can't leave. You will have created an illegal alien right here in Arizona. And that kind of threw him. But it did say I had to go on to, was it Yuma or somewhere I had to go to get, can't quite remember now, where he wanted me to go, where I was going to go and get the bike re-registered on Arizona plates. So I did the only thing I could do as a law-abiding citizen. I turned right and fled to Mexico. Just thought, I'll just run to the hills.
That's the end of that.
Yeah.
My experience was I only got pulled over once on my trip, and I think the state trooper was just bored. I was in Wyoming on my way to South Dakota, Custer. Of course, it was during the Sturgis Rally. I wasn't riding a Harley. My bike was at the time a BMW sport touring bike. And I think he was just so confused. He had never seen, what's this strange person doing on this motorcycle coming over here? And he was bored. So I think he just pulled me over. He actually took the picture of me in front of his squad car and stuff. He was very nice and let me off with a warning. Because of course the other thing is I'm used to riding in kilometers. I know you're familiar with miles, but I kilometers per hour. So I'm doing mental math constantly to make sure that I'm not over above the speed limit. And as you have all this time to do when you're doing helmet time, right? How many more miles do I have left in my tank? As you're calculating that. Anyway, it's a lot of that's part of the fun of long distance travel. Paddy, I want to talk to you. We're in a very, very strange time right now in this COVID crisis, and to bring it to a much more serious nature. I mean, the U.S. death toll as of today is well over 70,000 right now. In Canada, we seem to be escaping it a little bit, but as a byproduct of that, in Canada, our borders are shut down. Our international travel isn't happening. Americans are just starting now to ease up. My American audience and part of the rest of the world, I think, is just starting to ease up the travel restrictions within the country. But what do you think is going to be the future post-COVID? And what are the implications for you, for your business, for the magazine, and for motorcycle travel in general?
Well, for the magazine first, I can't pretend it's not having a big impact, because here in the UK, the majority of our sales are in airport departure lounges, mainline railway stations, and motorway services, and people aren't moving.
Wow.
So that, of course, has been a big thing. I think more importantly, and yes, we've now crossed, I think, 35,000 in the UK deaths, now, which is shocking. We're now the highest in Europe. Um, and I find that disappointing, actually, because we are an island, and generally island nations have done a very good job of tracking, tracing, controlling, that sort of thing, testing. But that aside, I do think it's worrying for travel because, well, for a start, the whole infrastructure that we're used to using is currently economically collapsing.
Mm-hmm.
The ideas of motels and hotels that are still existing, the ideas of ferry companies, we're going to see, or we may see, airlines going down. Those won't recover immediately, so that's going to have an impact. It's almost like we're going back 30 years, 40 years before sort of the great, globalization and the neoliberal boom that we all saw. So that's going to have a huge impact. But more concerning to me is, and why something like Overland Magazine and what you do is so important, is to get people to realize that people are all people. What we don't want to see come out of this is a sort of real insular take on nationalism where we're not going to cross borders, or we're fearful of another group of people the other side of a line. And when you think about it, I mean, that line is so arbitrary.
Yeah.
Maybe it's geographical, maybe it's a river, that might be the border, but quite often it is a line in the sand. And it's insane to consider that people will be so dramatically different, 3 feet this side of it or 3 feet that side of it. Travel, as Mark Twain always said, is what destroys. It's fatal to, what did he say? Fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and small-minded. It's travel that makes us realize that humanity is all the same and we're all very lonely. And it's why I'm always game when I travel. All those years I've traveled, I'm always game when someone says, do you want to come and stay at my house? Like, yes, I will take that risk, because 99.9999% of people are not mad axe murderers. They're meeting a funny pink guy with a weird accent and they want to find out more about him. And I want to find out more about how they live. So I am always delighted to meet anyone I can. So that's my biggest fear post-COVID, is that the very nature of movement and the fear of the other would increase.
Well, I'm keeping.
I'm too heavy, sorry.
No, I agree, and I completely concur. And while the Motelorcycle is designed for largely for regional travel. I mean, not everybody's taking 50 days riding 10,000 miles like I did, and it was never designed to be for everybody. For people like large overlanders who do that kind of do those kind of expeditions. I do hope even within a country. I hope that it's funny, even within borders. There are cultural differences and distinctions, and the ability just to get out and travel and understand those cultural distinctions is ever so important. Add that to and I hope that it doesn't stay forever, that the restrictions on cross-border international travel get eased up, so that we do encourage more people, because it is so important that we understand. You're absolutely right. We're all the same. We're all the same. Having lived halfway around the world for as long as I have, and traveled all around the world as much as I have, the differences are minute. We're all people first and foremost. And the real reason why your problem as an island nation is because you don't have Jacinda Ardern as your prime minister. I mean, in all due respect to Mr. John, I mean, she's just wonderful. The world has fallen in love with Jacinda.
Only every nation. Yeah.
The world has fallen in love with this person. Paddy, thank you so much for your time today. This has been a wonderful. I will bring up a copy of your book and put and your magazine, and people can go and purchase your magazine from Barnes and Noble or Chapters in Canada, and of course.
And indeed, if anyone watching in the States is going to need an excuse to travel next September, or this September, 5 months' time, maybe we'll all be free in 5 months' time. Maybe you can stick up the date of the Overland event in Oxford.
The Overland event, yeah, absolutely.
The Overland event. So that's like a 3D version of our magazine where we all gather, but we have we have trolled for years. We've trolled museums to try and find bikes that historically went around the world 80, 90 years ago, whatever. And we bring them all together in a bike show in the middle. We have some presentations, some film showings. And we do celebrate real ale. And I know that you'll laugh at that because, yes, it's not cold. It does have taste. But we do have some lagers as well.
And maybe have won an award since 1897. You have to read his book to get that reference, folks.
Maybe have won an award, yeah.
Paddy, thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to seeing you as soon as I possibly can.